5 Live Formula One.
Hello and welcome to the Marina Bay Street Circuit here in Singapore. And as you might expect, it is hot and it is humid. It's 31 degrees and there is a 69% worth of humidity. It is a little hot and sticky down here in the pit lane, let me tell you. And in actual fact, we had some rain earlier on today, but that seems to have moved away and it looks like we're going to have a dry FP3 session. Of course, the third and final practice session of the race weekend. The last chance for the teams and drivers to dial themselves in, fine-tune their packages and see if they can just tweak those upgrades that many of them brought yesterday so that they're ready for qualifying later on. And let's talk about yesterday because there was a bit of a surprise. Ferrari right at the top of the timesheets, getting themselves off to a great start with Charles Leclerc leading the way in FP1 and Carlos Sainz leading the way in FP2. Meanwhile, Red Bull saying that they've got things that they just don't understand. And don't forget, they can wrap up the Constructors' Championship this weekend, but as the way things are going, it looks like they're going to have to put their champagne on ice. So plenty to look forward to in the next 60 minutes. Up in the commentary box, our lead commentator Harry Benjamin is joined by former W Series driver Alice Powell and the BBC Sports chief F1 writer Andrew Benson. Harry, we've got one final practice session. The teams were very busy yesterday, weren't they, with some upgrades, lots of high-vis paint, the Flow-Vis that they spray all over the cars. Quite a lot of learning that will have gone on overnight, I'm sure. Does that mean that Red Bull are back in the frame, do you think?
Red Bull back in the frame. Well, did they ever leave the frame? Even though the pace, I suppose, from yesterday's practice session gives us a little bit of hope that it's not going to be a straightforward domination weekend for Red Bull. You're absolutely right. Pretty much almost every single team bringing quite a lot of upgrades, where we saw McLaren bring a huge upgrade to Lando Norris's car, and that seemed to translate into at least one lap pace for Norris and the McLaren. Equally, Mercedes and Ferrari are bringing a few bits and bobs, but it's Ferrari who look like they have at least a one-lap pace slightly over Red Bull at the moment. So, as you say, Red Bull could clinch the Constructors' title this weekend, but it's going to take a lot, and Ferrari are proving to be a bit of a pain in the side.
Absolutely. And Andrew Benson, Ferrari talking almost about changing an approach to coming into a race weekend. We hear they went in the wrong direction with Charles in Monza and they've learnt from that and changed their approach this weekend. Is that a change of approach that can get them a race win this weekend, do you think?
Well, it's interesting, Singapore. Sorry, Rosanna. It's half asleep still here in the commentary box.
Don't worry.
It does look like this is the best chance for a while for someone to at least threaten Red Bull. I don't want to get, we don't want to get anyone's hopes up just yet because Red Bull are so powerful this season. But Red Bull were definitely struggling for one lap pace yesterday, and that's the key. If they only qualify sort of 5th and 6th, then they are going to struggle to come through. Just remember Verstappen last year, he qualified sort of middle of the top 10, and he was at the beginning of the race, everyone was like, oh, of course you're going to win, because last year they were just as dominant in the second half of the season as they've been this season, and he didn't, and he said he wouldn't, and he was right. So we'll have to wait and see how Red Bull get on in this session for indications as to whether they've improved the car over the weekend. I'm not that surprised to see Ferrari quick. Their car's particularly good in slow speed, short duration corners. Think back to Charles Leclerc's pole in Baku, Monza as well, same sorts of corners. Singapore, full of that sort of corner. So, and you add that to progress that they've made with the car since the sort of big upgrade started in Spain back in June. And it makes sense for them to be as quick as they are. But let's see how this session shapes up.
Yeah, definitely. Another sort of unrepresentative session coming our way. It's under the sunshine, in the bright sun. Of course, we go racing at night time here in Singapore, so don't read too much into the next hour, I guess. But in terms of the new track, we've spoken about some corners being taken away. Alice, you've raced here. We've heard Lewis Hamilton and George Russell really liking the changes, say that there's a better flow now with this track. But Andrew just said that corners are where Ferrari excel. They've lost 4 of them this weekend. How's that going to change things?
Well, it doesn't seem to be slowing Ferrari down, does it? They were even surprised by their pace, even if Andrew wasn't. They said they've still got a little bit of fine-tuning to do in the free practice sessions, unlike Red Bull, who are worse, way worse than they expected to be. But I think it does add more flow, seeing we've taken out that section in the final sector, because it just allows that extra bit of straight. Is it going to be an extra overtaking opportunity? I'd say unlikely, unless a driver made a big error out of 14 and maybe was a bit early on the brakes into 16. But it's always been a driver favourite, certainly one of my favourites. Adding that you're racing under the lights as well just makes it extra special.
Well, we've got a green light at the end of the pit lane. I have to say, cars not spilling out of the pits. Only a couple of people deciding to head out. But nonetheless, I'm going to head up to the commentary box. So I'm going to let you take over, Harry Benjamin, Alice Powell and Andrew Benson. Let's get FP3 underway.
Thank you very much, Rosanna. It's the two Alfa Romeos that have gone out on track. Everybody else not in a rush. Valtteri Bottas and Zhou Guanyu have gone out on that soft compound of tyre. For those who wish to do a sync up, it's 59 minutes and 11, 10, 9 seconds remaining of this free practice 3 session, and the last of the practice sessions before we get qualifying underway a little later today. We'll be on air at 1:55 to do that. Let's take you through how the drivers and the team's standings look. Max Verstappen, 8 poles, 12 wins, 10 of them consecutive so far this year, means that he has 364 points at the top of the standings. Sergio Perez is second with 219. Max Verstappen cannot clinch the driver's title this weekend, but he will most certainly either do it in Japan or Qatar. Fernando Alonso is third in the driver's standings with 170 points. Nice battle there developing between himself and an old rival. Lewis Hamilton for Mercedes is just 6 points behind him. Carlos Sainz Jr. is fifth with 117 points. Charles Leclerc sixth with 111. George Russell, Lando Norris, Lance Stroll and Pierre Gasly round out the top 10 in the drivers' standings. And over in the teams, well, Red Bull could take the Constructors' title this weekend, but it does require them to finish 1 and 2 and take the fastest lap point, but also they need Mercedes, who sits second in the Constructors' Championship, to score 1 point or less. So not impossible, but a hard task for them to do this weekend, at least in Singapore. They do have 583 points. Mercedes have 273 in second. Then comes Ferrari, who leapfrogged Aston Martin last time out in Monza. They're in third, ahead of Aston Martin. McLaren is fifth. Alpine, Williams, Haas, Alfa Romeo and Alfa Tauri, the 10 constructors, with a really tight battle developing between the likes of particularly Haas and Alfa Romeo. Just a point between them at the moment, as Williams are starting to skirt up the road a little bit away from Haas and Alfa in seventh. So lots of battles still to be sorted throughout the remainder of this season as we get into the flyaways, and we head right here, Marina Bay Street Circuit in Singapore, the inaugural F1 night race. And Alice, this is a track that you have raced at in the W Series. You have stood on the podium here as well. We mentioned the track layout has been changed. There's due to some building works going on in the Marina Bay area. So we've got rid of 4 corners. We've now got a 400-metre straight that goes, sort of just knocks that all off, and then you get the final chicane and then into the double left-hander that sees out the lap. But just how demanding a track is this?
It's very demanding. You know, there's not much rest, which is one of the reasons why I was surprised when people were saying, yeah, Daniel Ricciardo, I think he's broken some bones in his hand, but he'll be back for Singapore. It's demanding. You've got a lot of turns, 19 of them if you include the couple of kinks that we've got dotted about the circuit. You don't get much rest. It's hard on the brakes, it's hard on the car, it's hot, as Rosanna's been touching on down there. It's very humid and warm, so it's not easy at all.
Yeah, well, it's just kicked off in the daylight here, so early action at the moment. Valtteri Bottas currently leads, but we are in Singapore, the first ever night race that Formula One hosted, and really looking forward to the lights going out on Sunday. Max Verstappen looking for his first Singapore win, the man who leads the championship, but he cannot take the title this weekend earliest he can do that is next weekend in Japan. Red Bull, though, could take the Constructors' title, but they'll need a 1-2 finish at the very least to do that. And right now, they aren't looking as quick and as dominant as they have done in previous races. Ferrari looking to prove a bit of a pain in the side for Red Bull, with only one more practice session remaining before we get qualifying underway a little later today. You can join us now for FP3 to see how it all unfolds over on 5 Sports Extra. Okay, 54 minutes and 54 seconds remaining of free practice 3. And hopefully I've built it up for the 5 Live listeners throughout.
I'm sure you have. You've built it up for me, that's for sure.
But it is a tough track. But also, as I mentioned, we're in the daylight at the moment. And we were in the daylight for FP1 as well. And I'm going to ask the question, how representative is this kind of a session?
Well, less likely to be representative compared to the remaining sessions we have on the weekends. As Rosanna said, and you said, it's in the daylight, it's in the sunshine, it's unsure of exact temperatures at the moment, around about 31 degrees air temperature and 38 track temperature. By the time they go out for qualifying later on, that would have come down, certainly the air temperature would have come down 2 or 3 degrees, which does make a difference. And also, you're not going to have the sun beaming on the track, you're going to have the lights. But obviously the sun makes it much warmer, which is one of the reasons why when it does rain at night time here, even though it's so warm and humid, it takes a while to dry up. But adding to that, but especially for the race, it's still tough physically for the drivers. As I said, you don't get much respite around here. You're constantly left, right, not many long straights, but it's still really warm. So making sure that you're hydrated, especially for these drivers, they would have been doing this last week. They would have been preparing for this way in advance to make sure you've got all the fluids on board, because they can lose up to 3-4 kilos of body weight, and you don't necessarily notice that you're getting dehydrated until it could be too late. And one small error here, and that can see you go into the wall, because the walls are so close.
This is the sound of Carlos Sainz, who's just come across the line in his Ferrari to go fastest, the 1:35.015 on the medium compounder tyre ahead of Stroll, but Verstappen is on an excellent lap as well. So is Charles Leclerc. He crosses the line and goes 5th on that medium compounder tyre. Next, we'll see Max Verstappen scream round the last 2 corners as they are overlooked by the enormous Singapore Flyer Ferris wheel, and Verstappen on that medium tyre finds 6/10 to go fastest. How did you keep cool? How do the drivers keep cool in these kind of conditions, which, you know, they do specific training for Singapore because of the humidity? Rosanna mentioned at the start, 67% right now.
Yeah, I mean, prior to me going out to Singapore, I basically had a bike in a room. I had put heaters in the room. We had sort of a humidifier in there as well. As we hear from Perez.
The rear is still on the edge. Feels a bit too pointy, the entries.
So Perez still struggling with the rear of his car, and you don't want that going into these high, heavy braking zones here at Singapore. And I just would cycle in full gear, so I'd be wearing, you know, leggings, a jumper, thick woolly socks on the bike for 45 minutes, and it was roasting. You probably didn't want to go in that room afterwards. They would go to actual chambers to do stuff like this, heat chambers, whereas I just had a makeshift one. And then ways to keep cool, you see often they're wandering around in ice vests. When they come into the garage, they will obviously have the air conditioned and the fan that will be pointing on them. Just trying to stay out of the sunlight, trying to stay in the heat, but in the cool AC. But before you do go out for a race, you don't want to then go immediately out of the AC straight into the hot car. You need to try and acclimatise, so you don't want to be sitting in the AC until the very last minute.
Rosanna, I presume you were spending copious amounts of time in the sauna before heading out to Singapore.
Do you know what? I would, Harry, but because I'm 5 months pregnant, I'm not allowed to, so my training has been minimal. But do not fear, I have a water bottle down in the pit lane with me. It is very hot down here. We're lucky in the pit lane. At this time of day, it's in the shade. It's the glorious committed fans who are basking in the sunlight at the moment. But of course, in a couple of hours' time, when we get quali underway, we'll all be enjoying the cooler night temperatures. They only drop by a couple of degrees, but yeah, at the moment it is spicy hot. And I'm just watching Alex Albon being strapped into his Williams car. It's taken a bit of time, the mechanic was struggling to get everything where it needed to be, but he's just got him in, got him sorted, hands device in the right place, all the cables for his radio in the right place as well, and he's just having a little practice with the steering wheel motion. But of course, yesterday he had trouble with the power unit, and it was the ERS pack that's had to be replaced, and he's all good to go. The team tell me they're just changing some tyres. The mechanic's just walking in front of me, carrying the tyres in their tyre blankets, and 4 new tyres are now being brought back to the car. So I'm sure it won't be long before Alex Albon in the Williams is out. His teammate Logan Sargent also still in the garage. So still a few people deciding to sit and wait it out for a few minutes longer in this FP3 session.
Yeah, as Valtteri Bottas just pumped in a pretty decent lap time as Alfa goes second fastest on the soft compound of tyres, and we're just seeing Max Verstappen find the runoff, not getting it turned into the right-hander, which then forces him to take a little bit of avoiding action, do a little 360 and back onto the track, Alice.
That was so bizarre. I was almost looking around the room, looking at Benny, looking at you, thinking, what have we just seen there? Yeah, he was going so slowly, and it was almost like he had zero temperature in his tyres. He sort of went to turn and thought, unless there was someone behind him, and he was trying to make sure he wasn't holding up the driver behind, and he thought, well, the best thing is for me to go down the escape road, do a 360 and come back again. But yeah, that was a bit bizarre.
Well, he's managed to carry on going and finish off, continue his outlap at the very least. We'll see if he peels back into the pits at the end of it. Oh no, he started the lap now, another outlap. So Verstappen no fastest, ahead of Stroll now. Bottas, Sainz, Perez, the top 5, Zhou, Leclerc, Gasly, the 6 drivers who have set a time. So still waiting for quite a few more. Lando Norris on a lap, Nico Hülkenberg 2 on a lap at the moment. But still, the 2 Williamses, the 2 AlphaTauris, a Haas of Kevin Magnussen and an Aston Martin of Fernando Alonso, all still in the pit lane. And actually, I don't know if Rosanna, if you're still down near Williams, but I know if you're near Haas, they're doing something quite interesting with their garage. I've heard they've got a new layout there to sort of be more efficient with their race and crash repair operations. I don't know if it's drastically different, but I don't know if it looks different to you or the other garages.
Do you know what? That makes me worried when you say for that crash and repair area. That means that they're already preempting something going terribly wrong this weekend. I am outside the Haas garage, as chance and luck would have it. Do you know what's really interesting is you go from track to track. We're lucky enough to follow this wonderful sport around. The garages do change. And I remember, was it in Zandvoort or was it in Monza? I can't quite remember. They come so fast these days. It was Pierre Gasly in the Alpine, wasn't it? His garage was so narrow. But actually the garages are a little bit wider here in Singapore. I'm just looking into the Haas garage. Maybe it's at the back, Harry, because I can't quite see anything different from where I'm looking sort of in at the 2 cars that sit side by side, of course. But there are other little areas that the teams have access to, and very kindly Mercedes actually said if I get a little hot during this session I can go into one of their cool rooms. But yes, it's very interesting. The only difference here with the pit lane is that some of the teams and drivers have been really struggling to get the cars out into the fast lane of the pit lane. Sergio Perez being kind of measured by his mechanics, sort of giving him the hand signals of like, yeah, you're okay, you're going to make it through. But some cars yesterday having to be stopped, pushed back and then repositioned so that they could get into the fast lane in the pit lane. So lots to think about here. It's not just the hot and humid conditions and the tight and twisty track. You've got to have your wits about you in the pit lane, let me tell you.
So Rosanna, Gunther Steiner, the team principal at Haas, was asked about the new garage in the press conference yesterday actually, and he was saying, I don't know where Harry's heard the crash thing from, because I haven't heard Steiner.
I heard it on motorsport.com.
Okay, well that's interesting, because he didn't mention that. He was talking about it being a thing to save costs on sea freight and sustainability. The other garage setup was pretty old, he said, and we just decided to make a new one. It's in strangled English, but basically he says it's better, it's cheaper, and sustainability. It takes about 2 or 3 tons out of the air freight.
Wow.
Yeah, well,
quite a bit as well.
But it's not the first time Haas have done something like that, of course, because they minimised their pit wall earlier in the year too, to only have I think 2 or 3 chairs essentially for the 3 personnel on the pit wall, because they Gunther Steiner realising that they didn't need that many people. Rosanna, have they maintained that throughout the season? What have Haas got for Singapore?
Yeah, exactly that. The pit wall has just 3 seats, 3 members of staff, and of course Gunther Steiner in the middle of that, with 2 engineers either side of him. I'm just looking, maybe it has been jazzed up slightly. There's a lot of red gantries now. It's, as I say, it's very difficult because it's 1 week to the next or 2 weeks. Oh dear.
Yeah, Verstappen still struggling out there, this time with upshifts. So normally we do hear Verstappen, finding these issues on a Friday, and then normally they're fixed, but carrying through onto a Saturday.
I will say he's obviously very sensitive to gear changes. He's always complaining about gear shifting, speed of it. And I think it's normally to do with corner entry on the downshifts. So actually, obviously, really the way the drivers manipulate the car on corner entry, sort of, braking, turning, especially because Pirelli tyres don't like braking and turning, how the gear shifts interact with the engine. Obviously, the car's on the edge all the time when they're doing that. He's obviously everyone's sensitive to different things. That's the thing that he's particularly sensitive to. You don't often hear him complain about the upshifts, though, so that's obviously just a slow upshift issue, which is driving him mad, although it can't be driving him that mad because he's fastest, 10th or so at the moment.
Yeah, 1:33.6 for Verstappen ahead of Sainz and Russell, Leclerc, Norris, the top 5. Back to you, Rosanna. Sorry, so it's clearly something they're carrying forwards with the pit walls. We were actually having this discussion earlier as well. Who sits on the pit wall these days? Because before, I think, back in the good old days, all the head honchos would be on the pit wall. But you look at something like Mercedes, and this might require you to walk up the other end of the pit lane, sorry, Rosanna. But
don't worry.
They normally, every time we see images or Toto Wolff is speaking, or now Jerome D'Ambrosio, any sort of high-ranking member, Bono, the Hamilton's race engineer, they're all in the garage, in that central console area. So who does that leave to sit on the pit wall for Mercedes?
Well, I will be able to tell you, I will run up there. I know you've got Ron Meadows, sporting director.
Yeah.
You've got Andrew Shovlin, their sort of top engineer. You've got Simon Cole. You have, the name escapes me now, but the new strategist, of course, that took the place of James Vowles, and another guy who's in charge of engines. So I need to get you the names, I promise I will. But in terms of Haas, you actually just have Gunther Steiner, Peter Kroller, their sort of operations manager at the team, and Ayo Komatsu, their chief engineer. So just those three for Haas, as you say, a much sort of shrunken pit wall. But as I look down, AlphaTauri have got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and Aston Martin 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, with Mike Crack at the moment just standing behind his seat, not on his seat, but there are 8 spaces. So yeah, it's really interesting how the teams decide to set themselves up, and sometimes it's better for their race engineers to be on the pit wall, sometimes it's better for them to be at their sort of engineering station, or is it called like Fantasyland or something at Mercedes? I can't remember what they call it, in the middle, something like that. I'll check that out for you as well.
Sounds fun.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, while you're reading them off, obviously the Alfa Romeo pit wall, who's on there?
You got Ruth Metzger.
Well, don't worry, I won't make you reel them all off.
Everybody knows that. Yeah, you're going to test me. I'm looking at. Also, it's very difficult because where I'm standing, I'm not allowed to cross into the fast lane in a pit lane, as you might expect for my health and safety. So you can just see their backs, but. Yes, I'm looking now. I'm actually behind the Aston Martin one. Just so many brains, Harry. Just so many brains. It's an honour to be amongst them. Separated by the fast lane, which probably says a lot.
Oh, well done, Rosa. I feel bad now. I've been sending you lots of homework so far. 42 minutes left of this free practice 3 session. And right now, it is still Max Verstappen who is fastest, although he's just been on the radio to complain about some upshift issues. So not very happy with that Red Bull still as Max Verstappen, but he's still fastest. He's coming to the pits. Leclerc has just come across the line, 0.003 of a second slower than Max Verstappen to go second fastest ahead of Sainz.
Yeah, so we said don't write Red Bull off just yet, didn't we? Max said yesterday that the pace was way worse than they expected. They were around about 7/10 off the Ferraris, who were at the front of the pack yesterday, struggling with the balance of the car, with the rear locking. He's obviously got the upshift issues as well now, but they said they will be diving into the data. They'll be having long meetings with the engineers last night to try and figure out what changes they can make. So clearly it's worked for now, as the sound you can hear is George Russell, who's bolted on a set of soft tyres. He's done a personal best in the first sector. He is purple, so fastest overall in the middle sector. He's got a little bit of traffic to his left coming in the final corner, but the car peels into the pit lane. He's going to go across the line, Harry, and as expected, because he's on the softs, he jumps up to the top of the times, but only 0.2 ahead of Max Verstappen.
Yeah, has teammate Lewis Hamilton also on the soft compound tyre, personal best in the first and the second sector, although not quite as he's faster than Russell in the first sector and a little bit slower in the middle sector. So we'll see what Hamilton's got across the line. Loses a bit of time, actually. And in the end, he's about 0.3 off in fourth for Lewis Hamilton, as Nico Hülkenberg also crosses the line. The Haas man down in 13th spot. Carlos Sainz comes over the Anderson Bridge. Then you're straight into the braking zone for the left-hander as you then head down Esplanade Drive towards turn 14, the right-hander. That's where we saw Max Verstappen have a bit of a bizarre moment earlier on and find the runoff and then do a 360. Now you're onto the new part of the track. There's a slight left-hand kink for turn 15. Then you come to the new 400-metre long straight, which cuts out 4 corners that were the Marina Bay area, the old part of the track where you used to turn in and go underneath the grandstand. That's now all gone. It's now a 400-metre straight, which brings you all the way down to turn 16 and 17, the chicane. Then you come perilously close to the wall before you get the final 2 corners, and Sainz manages all of that without damage and goes fastest, a 1:33.195.
That's a good time on a medium set of tyres there, and he just seems to be, well, I can't say jumping up to lead that Ferrari team, but he's had the edge a little bit recently over Charles, hasn't he?
Well, how much
enjoying himself
would
there
Monza
at Ferrari
have given him confidence?
Oh, huge. You know, getting a pole position gives any driver confidence. Doesn't matter who you are, what your name is. So that would have given him a lot of confidence. He led 14 laps, so he's obviously led laps before in his career in Formula 1, but again, he's had the confidence, but he beat his teammate as well. And everybody says, oh, well, you know, we're working as a team. It was really nice to see the Ferraris there. Yeah, but you want to beat your teammate, you know? You don't want to finish second to your teammate. And he did. He had withstood a lot of pressure from Leclerc, and he kept it there. And that's given him confidence. And especially, he knows that Charles is very good around here, getting the last couple of pole positions as well. Charles said it's one of his favourite tracks. So to stamp his authority early on, so we've still got 38 minutes of the session left to go, so there's still a long way, it can all change, but he seems to be stamping his authority over the weekend. He was obviously fastest yesterday as well, ahead of his teammate. Okay, it was a very, very small margin. But, you know, he's trying to show, hang on, I'm not going to be player number 2 driver here. I'm going to be up there fighting with you.
And that's actually, when he came into Ferrari, as Logan Sargent crosses the line in 15th for his soft tyre running in his Williams. It's the thing I've always wondered with Sainz's own mindset coming into Ferrari, because Sainz has hopped, skipped and jumped throughout the grid ever since he left Toro Rosso. And Charles Leclerc was brought into Sauber, then Alfa Romeo Sauber as a Ferrari junior, as the next Ferrari hope, and very quickly promoted into that Ferrari seat for showcasing just what a talent he is. So to then come into that team, to be Leclerc's teammate, he must have thought, I'm going to have to find something extra to stamp my authority down here, because he has gone from team to team and left. But the thing that's always impressed me, Andrew, is that Sainz has been fast in every single team that he's gone to.
Yes, so, I mean, if we cast our minds back to 2015, he was actually, if you look at their average qualifying performance between Carlos Sainz and Max Verstappen when they were Toro Rosso teammates, we got Leclerc going off to no damage at the first corner there on a replay. He was actually very slightly quicker than Verstappen on average in qualifying. Verstappen was probably more impressive in the races. And actually, it's the races where Sainz tends to struggle more. I just want to throw a bit of perspective into the Sainz-Leclerc debate about this year. It's true that in terms of relative qualifying position, as in who's beaten who, Sainz is closer to Leclerc this year than he was last year. I think it's 9-7 on merit when you count just qualifying sessions when you can make a fair comparison to Leclerc. But the average speed difference between them is very much the same as it's always been, which is about 1.5 to Leclerc's advantage. And about Monza, yes, Sainz out-qualified Leclerc, but he had a toe on both his runs, and Leclerc didn't, and it was only a few hundredths of pace between them. And although Sainz can say, oh yes, well, you know, I was using my tyres to hold off the Red Bulls more than Charles was, and therefore I ran out of tyres earlier in the race, the fact of the matter was he was slower than Leclerc at the end of both stints in Monza. Leclerc couldn't get past. Sainz drove a fantastic race, don't get me wrong, but I'm not sure we've seen quite enough yet to say that here's some set radio from Logan Sargent.
He just ran a little bit wide over the curve.
Radio
then it disappeared.
To say that he's stamping his authority on the team. He's very sensitive to the fact that Leclerc is the chosen driver at Ferrari. And that's why you see little moments of tension bursting out. One really good example was Silverstone in qualifying, where the team had already discussed who was going to go out in what order after a red flag. And even though they'd discussed it and agreed that it would be Leclerc ahead of Sainz, Sainz still felt he had to come on the radio going down the pits going, it's not fair, I should have gone out in front, I'm more vulnerable because I'm one place behind him, and in terms of time and so on, who's going to, if we've got time to get it, in other words, who's got time to get a lap in before the red flag, and even before the checker flag. And even having complained about it and agreed it, he then overtook Sainz, if you remember, overtook Leclerc going into the final corner just as they were starting their qualifying laps. That's the sort of thing Ferrari don't like to see. It was great that Fred Vasseur, the team principal, let them both race in a way that isn't typical for Ferrari in Monza. But they like their drivers to acquiesce to the team. The team comes first. So what they would see as unnecessary complaints from one driver or another don't go down well. And that's why, partly, while there seems to be no question whatsoever that Leclerc will sign a new deal to take him beyond the end of next year, he wants to stay, they want him to stay. It's not quite so certain that Sainz will stay, on both sides, both him and the team.
Do you think the Audi scenario is the main other option?
Audi is definitely an option. Do you want to just talk about this for a minute?
Yeah, Liam Lawson's just had a spin and coming into turn one. This is the sound of it as a replay. Yellow flag out briefly. Turns into the left-hander and takes a little bit of curb, and as he turns the steering wheel right, loses the rear and actually just manages to avoid hitting the wall as the rear really spins round him, Alice, doesn't it? And he locks up all of those medium tyres. Yeah,
I wonder if there's still a little bit of water locked into that bit of AstroTurf that is there before the sausage curb. He did run slightly too wide, had to be a bit aggressive with the steering to avoid going over the sausage curb, and then just lost the rear. He'll have some nice flat spots on those tyres, so I expect him to box at the end of this lap.
Yeah, I think those tyres are dead, aren't they, Alice? So just to finish the point about Sainz and the future, I think from what I'm told from people close to him, he does want to stay at Ferrari. That's his preferred option. But Andreas Seidel, who's the CEO of the Audi F1 project of Sauber at the moment, he obviously worked with Sainz and McLaren. He rates them very highly. Everyone in Formula 1 believes that there's some strong interest from Audi in having Sainz. And even though Sainz probably would prefer to stay at Ferrari, according to people close to him, it's got to be tempting for someone when you're in a position where you're not as quick as the other guy in the other car in your team, on balance. Sometimes you'll beat him, but usually he's quicker. And Leclerc, often he's better at using his tyres in the races as well, as we saw in Monza, for example, even though it worked out for Sainz in the end there. It will be tempting in his position to take the Audi offer and think, I can go there as number one and make it my team. So that's the sort of quandary he'll be going into this winter when he and Ferrari will be discussing their future, thinking about.
Runs in the family as well. There's the Audi blood with his father, a rally champion, currently racing and part of the Audi Dakar squad, so it would be a nice family tie-up. Sainz currently second, 3/10 down on George Russell, who is fastest with a 1:32.8 on that soft compound tyre. Verstappen third, Leclerc, Hamilton, Norris, Alonso, Magnussen, Ocon, Albon the top 10, Perez, Tsunoda, Stroll, Gasly, Hülkenberg the top 15, Sargent, Bottas, Lawson, Joe, and Oscar Piastri 20th and last. He's done 5 laps in pre-practice 3. It was last out on the hard compound of tyre. And even yesterday in FP2, Piastri was a little bit off the pace. Where did he finish? He finished down the order, didn't he? 15th in FP2. We discussed how difficult it is, Alice, for rookie drivers especially to get to grips with new circuits, but also Singapore in particular. He also doesn't have the upgrades that Lando Norris's car has, but it seems all is not quite as well as they would like it down at McLaren in the Oscar Piastri side of the garage.
No, appears not to be. I mean, we don't know if there's any extra issues. Maybe Rosanna might be able to fill us in with what's going on with Oscar a little bit later on, but he is on the hard tyre at the moment. He's not got the upgrades, of all the upgrades. I've been told that he's got a couple of them. Which ones he's got, I'm unsure, but he certainly hasn't got the full 9, the full set that Lando Norris has got. He's sitting there in P6 at the moment on the medium tyre. Oscar down there, as you said, Harry, plumb last on the hard tyre, 2.6 seconds off the overall place, which is George Russell in the 1:32. So times are still slower as expected of yesterday, because when they did set the time in free practice 2, it was a bit cooler, and they were 1:32.1 was the time that was set by Carlos Sainz yesterday, and that was on soft tyres.
Yeah, and for those wondering what the upgrades are that McLaren have bought, here's Perez first.
An improvement. Not really. I'm still sliding on entries, and then the front is feeling quite light on the braking.
Because that's Sergio Perez giving some feedback on some changes they've made to his Red Bull car. He's currently down in 12th, 1.4 seconds off, out there on the medium compounder tyres. So continued work being done down on both Red Bull cars there as they try and extract the maximum performance they can, and it seems like it's not coming to them as swiftly as they would like. Just to see off what McLaren have brought in terms of upgrades, the majority on Lando's car. Front wing, side pod, beam wing, rear corner, rear suspension, engine cover, rear wing, floor, new bits to the halo as well. So they really have dug out the kitchen sink on that one. Once again, last time they dug out the kitchen sink, well, it proved quite beneficial for them back in Austria. So we'll see if they can make another jump. And actually, the likes of Mercedes and Aston Martin have pinpointed McLaren this year, have gone, we need to make a McLaren-style jump. That's what we need to do. That's what Mercedes and Toto Wolff are very much hoping they can do for next season. At least I think Aston Martin are kind of hoping they might be able to do it before the end of the year. But it really is quite a testament to what McLaren have been able to do when you think of where they started in Bahrain. I mean, where did they finish? Lando Norris 17th, Oscar Piastri, I think he had hydraulic issues as well constantly throughout that race, and ended up retiring. So from where they were to where they have ended up, it's a mighty performance improvement.
They've made huge gains, haven't they? Of course, every single team will hope to start the season being at the front and not slipping back, like we've seen Aston Martin do that. You could say they started at the front end of the grid and they've slipped back a little bit. Mercedes, they were pretty happy with yesterday, Harry. Both drivers said that they seek to sort of build on what they classed as their best Friday of the year. They still have work to do overnight to the car to try and close that gap down to Ferrari and sort of try and build their way further up, but they're currently sitting P1 and P2. Okay, albeit they're on the soft tyre. George Russell 0.2 faster than Lewis Hamilton at the moment, as we're seeing a few drivers popping out to do some practice starts. So getting that all synced in, because this will be the last time, the last session they'll be able to do practice starts. So we're seeing a replay of Max Verstappen.
I'm at 5.
Okay, let's box.
And actually, I wonder if that's that oversteer that they're talking about. Just as he was turning in, you could see the rear of the car starting to slide, and then once he barreled into the corner, that was it. He had to turn out of it because he was going to spin all the way around. So even though he's up there in 4th, that Red Bull doesn't look particularly nice to drive.
This is fascinating, I think. This could really... We don't want to give too much hope, and they are still, let's not beat around the bush, unbelievably fast. But any problems that Red Bull have had with their cars have usually been sorted out during Friday's practice session. That is not proving to be the case. Perhaps that will change once the sun goes down completely and the track conditions change, temperatures change, and we get into qualifying, which will take place, of course, under the lights, as will the race. So this free practice 3 session, not as representative as yesterday's free practice 2 session, as Piastri, who we were talking about earlier on, is back out there and just comes across, still on that hard compounder tyre, but gets himself off the bottom of the timings and goes 15th. But this could prove a slight chink in the armour for Red Bull, and every other team has been looking constantly at ways of trying to find something that they can beat Red Bull on, or they can exploit. And maybe this is the race they can do that. Russell and Hamilton are currently fastest. Ferrari looking very good on 1 lap pace. Lando Norris is up there with the McLarens as well. Fernando Alonso, as always, is proving fast in his Aston Martin. So, hey, I'm going to get excited.
Who knows? Well, Ferrari, Carlos Sainz said yesterday after pre-practice too, he's obviously very happy to be topping the timesheets. He said, don't rule out Red Bull. He said they're still pretty strong in race pace. If they can dial out their issues, whatever they may be, with the rear locking, etc., then they will be right up there, and they will be challenging and threatening for the win, you know, as they have been all season. So, yeah, we'll just have to wait and see. But Perez is struggling at the moment. He's down in P13. He's about 7/10 off his teammate. So he'll be hoping to try and close the gap, both on the medium tyre. But that brings back the whole Perez debate that seems to have been going on and on for months and months, doesn't it? Whether he should be there in that second Red Bull seat. As Leclerc now is going down into turn 14, he's on the medium tyre. So we're just seeing people, I think, doing a few practice starts now. Harry, at least half the field are in the pits. As Perez, there we go, he must have heard me talk. He pops up into P8 now.
Alice Powell's criticised me. I've got to put in a fast lap.
Yeah, exactly.
Quick.
Yeah, he must have listened to the coverage. Nice to have you, Sergio.
They've got to have something to keep them occupied in that car, surely. Perez then gets up into 8th spot. Leclerc on medium combater tyres, going around doing a little bit of long run pace, running in 5th at the moment. But it is the two Mercedes that currently top the times, with a 1:32.883 for George Russell. 2/10 off is Lewis Hamilton in 2nd. Sainz, Verstappen, Leclerc the top 5. Norris, Tsunoda, Perez, Alonso, Magnussen the top 10. Ocon, Sargent, Albon, Stroll and Piastri the top 15. Gasly, Hulkenberg, Bottas, Lawson, who had a little spin not too long ago in his Alpha Tauri, down in 19th in front of Zhou Guanyu in the Alfa Romeo. Of course, if you missed yesterday's coverage, we were talking quite a lot about Zhou Guanyu because he's extended his contract, finally come to an agreement with Alfa Romeo. He will get another year. I imagine there's some options on that as well, but it's a tricky time to be a part of that team, actually, especially if you're a driver. Valtteri Bottas does have had another year anyway. But of course, speaking of Audi with Carlos Sainz, that team will become Audi in 2026. They'll have a couple of years of treading water, and it's going to end up for someone like Zhou Guanyu being an incredibly crucial year next year. He's going to have to show something to keep around, because whether Audi are going to want to see pure performance from him, and if they don't, well, he's going to need to showcase to other teams why he should stay in Formula One. And right now, looking at where the doors might possibly be, I can't see many for Zhou Guanyu.
No, this sport changes quickly, though.
That is true.
Especially when drivers look at Nick de Vries, for example. You know, I think...
Who?
Exactly. I think he was unfairly turfed out of that Alpha Tauri seat. I felt that, personally, he needed a little bit longer, but you just never know. We touched on it yesterday. We went in the whole debate, didn't we, with how it comes in with politics, with the finances that he brings, but I still think he's doing a pretty good job. He's sort of been thereabouts with Bottas. Okay, Bottas has sort of had the legs at the moment. He is 3/10 off his teammate, as Sergio here's Oscar Piastri, who's just running a little bit right. Oh, managed to catch it. So that was nearly something similar down at turn 1, Harry, to what we saw of Liam Lawson, just running ever so a bit too wide on that AstroTurf, having to pull it more aggressively back to the left to avoid that sausage curve there, and nearly spinning round. So we've got majority of the field at the moment, haven't we, sitting in the pits with 21 minutes left on the clock.
Yeah, Tsunoda's out there, though. So is Sainz, and so is George Russell. You just heard the voice of racing driver and a woman who stood on the podium here in the W Series, Alice Powell, alongside myself, Harry Benjamin. BBC's chief F1 writer is also here, Andrew Benson, and down in the pits is Rosanna Tennant. And Rosanna, you're impressing Carrie on hashtag BBC F1. I'm very impressed that Rosanna Tennant was reeling off the names of the people on the pit walls, and she was having to do that when they had their backs to her.
Thank you very much. I take that compliment. Do you know what? I did take a stroll back up to Mercedes because obviously they are a little bit further down the other end of the pit lane to where I was when we were chatting about Haas. And it's Leo Donacet da Silva who's the race strategist on the pit wall. Rosie Waite obviously deals with their strategy in terms of head of strategy, but it's Leo on the pit wall alongside Andrew Shovlin, alongside Ron Meadows, and on the far right it is Simon Cole, who's your chief engineer trackside. So there you go, that's your Mercedes layout, just 4 of them. As I said, some having lots more people on their pit wall. And I said Fantasy Island. I've checked with the team. It is Fantasy Island.
No way.
Or as I spoke to one of the former garage technicians who now looks after Lewis Hamilton on race days and race weekends, and he said you can just call it the centre console. But do you know what? I'm sticking with Fantasy Island.
Why is it called Fantasy Island, or did we not want to ask that question?
I don't know. Now I wonder if they're pulling my leg, or engineering station, whatever.
Fantasy
where the
Island's
magic
more fun.
happens. Yeah, exactly. I'm taking that. And that down there is Lewis Hamilton heading out in the Mercedes on soft tyres. Pit lane gets a little bit hectic. Yuki Tsunoda just following him down. He's just come in, and we've got a Ferrari coming into the pits now as well. That's Carlos Sainz. Little practice pit stop for Ferrari. And do you know what? This heat, the humidity, it can sometimes lead to a few little mistakes. It was really interesting just watching the Mercedes engineers and mechanics just then, before they sent Lewis out. The 2 front gunners gunned the tyres on, and then the number 1 mechanic on Lewis's car, he went and just triple checked the nuts. So I feel like there's a lot of triple checking going on. I'm sure they do that every weekend, but here in the heat, when little things can just pass you by, it's great to see how on top of things the teams are.
Yeah, so easy for little mistakes to happen, isn't it? Where even on track, it's a street circuit, the walls are closer to you, but even operationally as well, the heat can make you even things getting a little bit slippery if you're a bit sweaty. This is the sound of George Russell making his way over the Anderson Bridge into the braking zone of the 13 hairpin and up through the gears and onto Esplanade Drive. He's on a very quick lap at the moment on that soft compounder tyre. Already has the fastest lap at the moment, but going faster still. He's 3.5 tenths up on his own time through the middle sectors at 27.0 in sector 1, 39.0 in sector 2. So on course for a blistering lap time, making his way to the final chicane now, as I think that was an Alfa Romeo getting nicely out of the way for him, as there's an Aston Martin, gets oh so close to the wall on the right hand side but doesn't touch it. Then 2 double left-handers to finish off the lap. Russell half a second up on his own time, goes for a 1:32.364. Nice
lap. Yeah,
nice.
7 tenths quicker than his teammate Lewis Hamilton, who is on an outlap now. So I expect, he's on a soft tyre too, that he'll be bursting in some time. So Mercedes at the moment, the only ones in the top sort of 5, 6 that are out on the soft tyre. Saying that Lando's now on the soft tyre, and he's setting the timing screen and light flashing greens and purples, so that means personal best and also overall best. So I expect we will probably see Lando, if he continues this lap, to pop up to at least the top 2 of the time. So we're interested to see if anyone else ventures out on that soft tyres. The sound you hear is Alex Albons, who ride on board with him. Wow, he got very close to the wall there in that final part of the track. He goes through the final corner. No overall best, but he personal best lap time jumps it up to P4. So good lap there, 1 second off George Russell's pace.
Yeah, nice lap from Albon, who was confined to the garage for most of free practice 2 yesterday with a suspected power unit change. We're told he's now swapped in some new parts and is back out on track in that special liveried car for this weekend. A Golf livery with the orange and pale blue adorning that Williams. Esteban Ocon,
wow.
The Alpine though, has just slot up into second.
Birthday tomorrow.
Yes, happy birthday for
27.
tomorrow. Well, it was Carlos Sainz's birthday over the Monza Grand Prix weekend. And look what happened there. So maybe the same could happen for Ocon. And it was Rosanna's last week. I don't think I said happy birthday to Rosanna.
Oh
no.
We missed out. We didn't get an invite to the party. That's
yeah, where was the invite, Rosanna?
Oh, sorry. I didn't have a party, that's why.
There
when you
we
get
go.
to my age, you know, they just come and go, these birthdays. But yes, I am 36 years young now. I don't think I look any wiser. I just look more haggard, quite sweaty right now. So that's a nice picture. I'm sure you're glad it's radio.
68% humidity. Enjoy. Well, clearly, if it's a birthday, is the common theme in Formula One right now. Then Ocon, then up into third, was second, but that's now been dropped down to third because Lando Norris on the soft compounder tyre and his McLaren featuring a load of upgrades has gone fastest, a 1:32.303. So just over half a tenth between himself and George Russell. So it is tight. Lewis Hamilton, though, is going to have something to say about that as he comes across the line. Sparks fly as he goes over the red and white rumble strips that peel you on to the main straight. The DRS slams shut on the rear wing and he goes third fastest. 2/10 off Norris, though, a 1:32.535.
Yeah, so he must have lost a chunk of time, whether it was a mistake or something in that first sector. He still set a personal best. He was fastest in the last two sectors, as we're seeing. Or did Alex Albon? I don't think he touched the wall.
That must
he
have
literally
been.
could not have got any closer to the wall there in the second to last corner.
He must have
Wow.
grazed the paint, surely. This is the wall on the exit of turn 17, which then leads you on to the last, turn 18 and 19, which is the final double left-handers that see off the lap. So we've seen before, especially in qualifying, many drivers with their right rear wheel taking a huge chunk out of that wall. I think yesterday there was a graphic that came up on the screen where Esteban Ocon was the closest, I think about a centimetre away from the wall, but I don't know, you couldn't fit anything through there between Albon and that wall, but he lives to fight another day. Some faster lap times, though, coming through as drivers start to switch back on or on for the first time for the soft compounder tyre. Lance Stroll comes across the line to get his Aston Martin up into sixth, just behind his teammate Fernando Alonso in fifth, but Oscar Piastri finds some time after languishing towards the rear end of the timing screens, and the McLaren driver goes fourth fastest, 4.5 tenths of his teammate, but a reminder that Piastri doesn't have all the same upgrades that his teammate is enjoying this weekend.
No, we're listening now to Liam Lawson, so he's out on the soft tyre. Not a bad first and middle sector, but still lacking behind those that have set the fastest ones. Gasly is out on a real push lap as well on the soft tyre. So a lot of drivers now popping up into the top 10. Of course, we're going to wait and eagerly see if the Ferraris and the Red Bulls pop out, but that's up to P10 now for Liam Lawson. So he's still lacking a little bit behind, 1.2 seconds off, but I think that's a fairly decent job from the rookie.
Yeah, we'll wait and see what Tsunoda can do. He's in the pits at the moment, so we'll see. I'm sure Tsunoda's getting ready to put some soft compound tyres on as Pierre Gasly in the other Alpine comes across the line and he goes 10th fastest on the soft compound tyre, so not as fast as his teammate Esteban Ocon. The Gasly personal bests in all of the sectors. Where does he lose time compared to his teammate? Kind of a little bit everywhere. So
He's 10th though, he's off his teammate.
Yeah, so work to do then, but it is the nature of street tracks tends to make the field tighter anyway, because we don't have these huge long straights that allow some teams like Red Bull to get a massive advantage where they have out-and-out straight line speed. I mean, we've seen the Williams as well. They really come alive when it comes to straight line speed, although there has been a few outliers to that this year. But Albon and the Williams team looking a little bit pessimistic on their performance going forward for the next couple of rounds as they struggle with the likes of Singapore, Japan, perhaps Qatar as well, hoping that maybe when we get to Las Vegas, which again is going to be a street circuit, but it has more longer straights, that they might be able to come alive there. But we'll wait and see, because performance is quite hard to pinpoint with that Williams team sometimes. It really does change. But Verstappen back out on track. It's not been a straightforward weekend for the Red Bulls so far. They aren't out and out fastest of everybody. They are not proving to be the dominant force that they have been all season long. They've got issues, complaining of the rear instability. Verstappen on the radio earlier on in this session complaining of upshift issues with his gears. Verstappen 12th, Perez 16th, but they're on outlaps, and Verstappen is currently on the soft compounder tyre, but only a personal best in the first sector.
Yeah, he's 3 tenths down, well, just under 3 tenths down from Lando Norris in that first sector. So we'll wait to see now as he comes through in sector 2. Overall, it's close in that middle sector, but he's still 3 tenths down on the overall pace at the moment. So either he's not switched these soft compound of tyre on, or he is still struggling with the rear of his car. So he comes into turn 16 now, so entering the final part of the lap. He's going to then sweep it through the final couple of corners through turn 19 now, crossing the line. That's going to pin him up to P4. But he'll be quite disappointed, 3 tenths off, because they weren't looking too bad on that medium tyre, were they really? So that's fairly disappointing. I'm sure Max Verstappen will be not particularly happy with that, and I'm sure we'll find out at some point over the radio.
Yes, it's always an enjoyable listen whenever Max converses with his engineer, Gianpiero Lambiase. Carlos Sainz, the other Ferrari driver, and Charles Leclerc are both out there going faster on the soft compounded tyre. They have fallen down the timing screens a little bit as others have set fast times on that soft compounded tyre. Sainz currently 9th, Leclerc 13th. Got a yellow flag out in sector 3 at the moment. So it could be a car, it could be for a monitor lizard. It's gone back in for a green flag very quickly. So we'll wait and see what that was about, if it was anything worth noting. But no lizard sighting so far for this FP3 session. We had quite a few in yesterday, and one meeting a bit of an unfortunate end, I think, courtesy of Fernando Alonso on that one. But none have come a cropper for FP3 with just 10.5 minutes remaining. Leclerc, Sainz, fastest of anybody in the middle sector, 6/10 up. Down through the brake, down through the gears, into the final chicane, getting oh so close to that wall on the right-hand side, which we saw Albon get oh so close to. Sainz round the final corner, fastest of anybody, a 1:32.065, 2/10 clear of Lando Norris. What has his teammate got? Charles Leclerc,
He's
who is
backed
back
off. Yeah.
Massively.
I think he's made a mistake around sort of turn 7 and 8 probably, because it was just after the start of the second sector where his mini sectors on our timing screen here in the commentary box. In air-conditioned splendour, Rosanna, are grey rather than green or purple.
Just had to get that one in there as well. Just rub it in a little bit more. This is the sound of Alex Albon. We're just seeing a replay. They're down into the braking zone of turn 14.
Yeah,
and this is what Verstappen... This is the corner where Verstappen went deep earlier. He does try to turn in, but then just doesn't. Carries too much speed.
Yeah, I was going to say, I wonder if there was a yellow flag out for a little while.
I'm sorry, but I cannot drive to these upshifts. What is this?
Understood. We were anticipating the comment. I'll have a look, see if I can give you a switch position.
Unacceptable.
Well, I said we'd probably hear some
Yes.
Max radio, and that will give us a better picture, a better story of what's going on there down at Red Bull. He's not happy, is he? Unacceptable with his upshifts. I mean, it is a very bumpy track, so if you do happen to hit a bump at the wrong point, or you can find round street circuits, if you even normal circuits, you bring it slightly to the left, you avoid a bump. So when you're going up the upshifts and it happens to spike the revs, that can then not help with then changing up a gear. So I wonder if it's something to do with that, but I very much doubt it. It could be just a gear sync, a delay of the pulling of the paddle to then the gear changing up. Who knows? But definitely Max is not enjoying his time going around the Singapore circuit at the moment, as Charles Leclerc is on another try. He's going again, not fastest overall in the first sector. He's 7 thousandths down to Carlos Sainz. Overall lap time now, so we'll have a keep a close eye, because it's going to be a nice battle, I feel, brewing between these two Ferraris later on today for pole position.
A battle between two Ferraris? Yes, please. Thank you very much. Leclerc just had a little bit of a moment coming out of turn 14 where got on the throttle and the rear wheels start to spin up, but now he comes around the final corner and 3/10 down for Leclerc. A 1:32.3. It's Sainz, Norris, Russell, Leclerc, Hamilton the top 5, Verstappen, Piastri, Perez, Magnussen, Ocon the top 10, Alonso, Stroll, Albon, Lawson, Gasly the top 15, as Hulkenberg gets up into 8th spot actually, Sargent, Tsunoda and Zhou, the 20 drivers.
Just want to say, so Leclerc is down 3/10 down for his teammate, but he did try and do a push lap, as Benny said, that he probably made a mistake round about 8 or 9. That will still have taken a lot out of his tyres. It's hot here. It's still at the moment air temperature 37 degrees, track temperature's basically 31 degrees. So even though you have a push lap and you only do half a lap, that's still taking a lot out of the tyres, especially in these warm conditions, as Max Verstappen's moving out of the way for some traffic. So I would say that's probably not giving us a sign of how close the Ferraris probably will be later on today, because Leclerc, he was going to be on the back foot with having to back out halfway through a lap. So I expect him in qualifying, if he keeps it mistake-free.
Boxes lap. I'd like to test something on the upshifts.
I literally just get to the pits.
I No.
So,
It
sounds a bit rocky down there at Red Bull, doesn't it?
Well, it always sounds a little bit tense between Verstappen and his teammate, but they do assure us they get on very, very well. But Verstappen comes into the pit box then. Rosanna is down in the pit lane. I don't know if you're near Red Bull, Rosanna, but clearly not happy at all with only, 6 minutes left of FP3 for Max Verstappen.
Yeah, I've got quite a good vantage point at the moment. Sergio Perez came in, he's gone straight back out. Max, as he said, was coming straight into the pit lane. He's just been pushed back into his garage. Interestingly, Carlos Sainz, I think it was actually, who came in and just did a run through the pit lane, didn't actually stop in the pits. And I am now just watching Lewis Hamilton being pushed back into his garage at Mercedes. And it's really interesting. They've been keeping their mechanics busy this evening, Mercedes. Lewis Hamilton doing a lot of work on that soft tyre, 3 laps on all the soft tyres. He's had 4 different ones now, always on the softs, but only getting 3 laps on them. So, Andrew, what are they doing there at the Mercedes?
I don't know, Rosanna. You're the one in the pit lane.
Andrew, can you just reel off the Alfa Romeo pit wall quickly?
But it's the same, George has only been on the softs as well, but he did 9 on the first set, then 3 laps, so that's what I'm talking about in terms of 3s and 9s there. And the only other driver I can see doing something similar, but way further down the order, is Alex Albon in the Williams. So really going for it on the soft tyre, but it's very interesting just to do 3 laps on the tyre each time.
Yeah,
they're building for Q3, I guess.
I don't know, but I mean, it's interesting that they've chosen to do 2 runs on the soft tyre in this session, whereas most other teams have gone for 1 run on the medium and 1 run on the soft. It suggests to me that Mercedes are trying to save as many sets of mediums as they can for the race, just in case, for example, if you only go into the race with 1 new set of mediums, if there's a safety car, you might be potentially vulnerable because you might want to change tyres then because your tyres are old, but you might only have used mediums, whereas the medium might be the tyre you want. So it might make sense to keep mediums like that. So we'll have to look at the tyre allocation. I haven't got it up in front of me at the moment, but it'll be about that, I think, Rosanna, more than preparing for qualifying, I would have thought.
Carlos Sainz just had a very scary moment coming down Raffles Boulevard into the left-hander of turn 7, and we see a lot of cars running out wide there, Alice. There's a bit of a raised red and white curve on the exit, and that Ferrari got all over it and then nearly was into the wall because of it.
Yeah, it was very close, wasn't it? If you know you're going to go over that curve, the best thing to do is just skip right over the top of it, because you do then run the risk of ending up shooting left into the wall, as that sound is George Russell, who comes through the final corner and does a very good job in the Mercedes. He pops up into P2, yeah, so he improves his lap time just under 1/10 of a second off Carlos Sainz. Says we will get to see a replay, so he just gets a bit of understeer, runs slightly wide, drops the rear wheel, his rear right wheel over that drop off on that curb, and then you heard there the spike of the engine as the rear kicked out. He was lucky there, because I've seen times there, and he actually bottomed out as well, so that was what caused the main issues. He bottomed out and it lifted that wheel up. The rear right wasn't even touching the ground, so it just shows how low that Ferrari is running. It's almost like running a skateboard over the curb.
And no shock, he immediately backed out after that, so took his foot off the throttle and decided to live to fight another day. To Carlos Sainz, who does have the fastest lap time at the moment, but there is absolutely nothing between himself and George Russell, less than a tenth between them. Norris Leclerc's on an outlap at the moment. Hamilton's back in the pits. Verstappen, after coming into the pits, they're testing something to try and ease his woes, particularly with upshifts. He's back out. This is the sound of the Dutchman and the reigning champion. That's downshifting.
Yeah, but
hear what he sounds through upshifting.
The upshift sounded okay. I just turned up the FX in my ear to just try and get a listen. It sounds fairly smooth to me, but it doesn't always necessarily have to be a sound. It can be a feel. So if you're feeling it's quite clunky on the paddle, you're feeling it's quite clunky underneath you, maybe that's we won't hear that because we're obviously not sat in the car with him. So maybe it's not a sound, it's a feel, but someone who's feeling pretty good.
Oh, Charles Leclerc, rally style over the exact same curve that Carlos Sainz's teammate found a lap ago, coming out of turn 7, and Leclerc getting all sideways on it, manages to hold on to that Ferrari.
I was just saying he's feeling pretty good, and then of course I totally ruined his commentator's cursed, yeah. But Max Verstappen has set not a bad first sector, actually. So he's less than half a tenth off at the moment compared to Carlos Sainz's fastest time overall. So let's have a little listen to see if we can hear these gear changes.
Downshifting into the hairpin, and now along Esplanade Drive. Just cut away from the onboard there, just as we wanted to hear it. But the Ferrari and the Alfa Romeo get out of the way as he comes into the braking zone of the right-hander of turn 14, and now the left-hand kink of 15 before the new 400-metre straight that cuts out the 4 corners where the cars used to go back under the grandstands on themselves. We now head straight down to turn 16 and 17, the quick chicane which brings you out oh so close to the wall on the outside corner of the track, and then the double left-hander to see off the lap. Verstappen crosses the line as DRS rear wing flap is open, and it's 4th fastest, the 1:32.3 off of the fastest lap time from Carlos Sainz.
So he's made an improvement, but I would personally say, I don't know what you think, Andrew, but the Red Bull still doesn't look very nice to drive.
No, he had an oversteer moment, didn't he, into the hairpin at the end of the Anderson Bridge onto the sort of that straight leading up to the next hairpin, and that looked really awkward. It's exactly what Perez was complaining about earlier in the session. It's exactly what Verstappen was complaining about all yesterday. Of course, we only get to hear what the director chooses for us to hear, and he's been focusing on Verstappen's comments about gear shifts so far this session. But from that lap, it looked like he as well is still struggling with oversteer in that car.
Yeah, that's what it looked like. Certainly does. So maybe not the only thing. Let's have a look. Charles Leclerc now is trying. He's going again. He's going again, Harry.
He hasn't been able to get really a clean full lap so far on this soft compound tyre for Leclerc.
No, he hasn't. And his first sector is not even a personal best. So he's down in the first sector. Again, he would have taken life out of the tyres, especially getting sideways there at turn 7. So it's going to be a tough ask for him to jump up the order now or improve on his lap time, as he might come up to a little bit of traffic. They're probably all going to go out of the way. It looks like it was Oscar Piastri was one of them, and George Russell as well, as he just manages to squeeze through coming into the final corners. He will come along now and take the checkered flag. Does he improve? No,
wasn't finding any time there, and that is it. That is practice done and dusted. Next up, qualifying, but it's Sainz and Ferrari who had the advantage right now with a 1:32.0 fastest ahead of George Russell.
Upshift feedback, please, Max.
Yeah, maybe a little bit smoother, but yeah, miles up still. It's just getting weird spin. It's not only upshift, it's also downshift.
Okay, so
and time running out for Max Verstappen to sort these issues. In fact, well, it has run out. Clearly, he's not happy. It's not where he wants it to be, that Red Bull, with upshift issues and downshift issues. The rear not playing ball. He finished that session 4th fastest, just behind Lando Norris, but Verstappen 3/10 off of Sainz's time. Leclerc was 5th, ahead of Hamilton, Piastri, Perez. The other Red Bull also struggling, down in 8th, ahead of Hülkenberg and Yuki Tsunoda, rounding out the top 10 in his AlphaTauri. Then it was Kevin Magnussen, Esteban Ocon, Fernando Alonso, Lance Stroll and Pierre Gasly, the top 15. In front of Liam Lawson, 16th, Alex Albon, 17th. The 2 Alfa Romeos of Valtteri Bottas and Zhou Guanyu, 18th and 19th, with Logan Sargent bringing up the rear of the field in 20th.
Thank you very much, Harry Benjamin and Alice Powell and Andrew Bock, sitting quietly, comfortably and coolly in that commentary box. Did I say Andrew? What did I call you?
Who? Andrew Box?
Andrew Bock. I was bringing together commentary box. He called me Singapore at the start of the show. That actually wasn't in revenge, I promise you. I was just thinking of the commentary box. Can't think why. It's a little hot out here. Thank you very much for talking us through that final 60 minutes of practice. Well, advantage Ferrari, as you say, Harry, but can they hang hang on to it for qualifying, do you reckon?
Oh, I don't know. I just always sense that Red Bull and Verstappen pulled something out of the bag last minute. But look, this is the first time, maybe all season, where the issues that Verstappen has complained about have not gone away after the Friday pre-practice session. It has lingered on into Saturday, and that's practice done now. We go into qualifying next. They've got a bit of time to do a few tweaks, but then they're out of time. And right now, Carlos Sainz is the man with the advantage, and that will boost him and his confidence. So it's going to be tight, and I'm going to sit on the fence.
Oh, okay, fine. I'm going to go and sit in a cool room. Alice, in terms of what they can do between now and qualifying, I mean, it's going to be a case of suck it and see for Max when he gets in the car later.
Yeah, it is. He's still saying that he's struggling for rear grip. And so he's, as we said when watching there, he's still not quite happy with the rear of his car. He's coming on the grid now to do a practice start. So it just doesn't seem to be going his way, but I would never write him off. But I would say, I'm not going to sit on the fence, I would say that Max won't be qualifying on pole later on. And actually, at the moment, I'm going to go for, do I have to pick one? Or
yeah, go on.
I'll go for Sainz, but I think that you will see possibly George Russell up there in the top 3 as well.
Well, that's where he was in FP3. So Carlos Sainz fastest in FP3, making it 2 out of 3 for the Spanish driver. George finishing second and Lando Norris third there. Will it stay the same as we get closer to qualifying? Join us at 5 to 2. We'll be online only. But from Harry, Alice, Andrew and me, Rosanna Tennant, it's goodbye.